Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life.
This year's Midwest Mechanical Weed Control Field Day, the nation's premier event for cultivation tools, taking place on Wednesday, September 27th at the Ohio State University Farm in Worcester, Ohio. The field day connects farmers, machinery manufacturers, and researchers for a single-day event that draws farmers from all over the Midwest. It is the place to see weeding tools of all scales for vegetables and row crops. From two-wheel walk-behind tractors to camera-guided toolbars to autonomous laser weeders. Come for the trade show, education sessions, and field demonstrations. To register and learn more, call 217-840-2128 or visit thelandconnection.org.
Hey, Thriving Farmers, I'm Michael Kilpatrick here with yet another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. This is a little bit of a different podcast. This is actually another continuation of the Farm on Central series, where we break down something on the farm that we're doing, whether it be marketing or products or crops and all of that sort of thing. And I think the last one we did, Savannah, was on strawberries. That was last year.
Yeah, how we structured our U-pick.
Which was this year very successful.
Yes, it was.
It was a crazy, actually this year is 7 weeks long, so it went much longer. But we are not here to talk about strawberries. We are here to talk about sourdough.
Yes, we are.
Now, let's give people a little bit of background around the farm here. You do a lot. Your focus is more on
education.
Okay.
Making sure, I kind of like to think of myself as the hub of a wheel. A lot of things happen outside of me, but yes,
you keep track of a lot. You keep the people moving. When I'm like in a podcast, you're like the bouncer to make sure, or like in a meeting or something like that.
If a ball gets dropped, I feel like I can suddenly have to go, pick it up, which is fine.
You do CSA deliveries. You interface with some of our vendors.
I develop recipes. I was making a lot of the things for a long time.
Until we were able to bring someone in for doing that.
Right.
Yeah. And then obviously you keep our 3 kids.
Yeah. I mean, that's my main job.
Yeah. And then homeschooling them as well.
Yes.
So, and then food for us. So
I keep track of your wallet usually.
Well, there's that too.
I usually know where Michael's wallet is, even if he doesn't.
So yes, I may ride the tractor, but I can't find my wallet.
I can't back up a trailer, but I know where the wallet is. So, we all have our strengths.
All right. So sourdough, let's start diving into that. Obviously we eat sourdough, but we've also integrated it into our business in multiple ways. So we are just teasing that because we'll get to that at the end. But I think the goal was to kind of really just talk about the why of sourdough, and then a little bit of the how of sourdough, and kind of like integrating it into our family and why we do what we do. So let's talk about that is, I think the health benefits, or why would one want to go for sourdough? Because I think that's, a huge one of like, people may think sourdough is a little bit harder to do. It can be a little bit harder to make. So what you got?
What's the question?
Why sourdough?
Oh, why sourdough? Well, I think the cool thing about sourdough is that, it really had a moment in 2020 during the pandemic. Everybody started doing sourdough because you couldn't find commercial yeast in stores. And everyone was at home, so they had time to kind of faddle around with it. And it really had its moment, and it's continued, which is good.
So with that, you're saying too that there is a little bit of a process behind it. Because with like a regular yeast bread, you pour the flour in, pour the yeast in, turn it on, you've got your loaf, and away you go. But
it's a few hours and you've got bread.
What is the length of a sourdough process? If let's say you have your starter, from starter to actually eating the bread, how long are we looking?
About 2 days, but you're not doing things the whole time that it's not like you're doing something for 2 full days. You're doing a little bit in the morning. You might do something in the evening. You might bake it the next morning. Like, it's not constant hands-on. It's just small pockets of time as you're coming and going about your life. There's just little things you have to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And your way you do it is different. So we'll get to that. But what are
Yeah.
some other benefits? I mean, I think a huge one is that it's doesn't have a lot of the preservatives that regular bread does.
Right. Absolutely. It's super basic. It's flour, water, salt, and your starter. It's really magical that you can take these really simple ingredients and you get bread, and you can turn it into lots of other things too, which we can get to. But yeah, it's also a lower glycemic index, especially if you're using like whole grains. So that's really helpful for people who are watching just their sugar, which we all should be. It's full of probiotics and prebiotics, and because it's soured or fermented, the phytic acid's lower. So, or it's broken down, so it's easier to digest. It's easier for your body to break down. And like for our family, we really don't eat gluten, but we discovered that if I soured our bread for 18 to 24 hours, that we were all able to eat it really well. No one was having an issue.
Well, and it just tastes really good too. You can't you can't deny that sourdough is really, really tasty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's natural fermentation. Yeah, there's a lot of things there too. It got the natural acids and stuff in it. So it's really good for you. Now, I think another thing is people are like, if I'm thinking about doing sourdough, what are the supplies they're going to need? I mean, when you started, you were super basic.
Oh yeah. One of the things that I love about sourdough is that I feel like you can approach it from this very broken down, don't need all the fussy this, that, or the other. The only equipment that I think you absolutely have to have is a kitchen scale. Because as much as I thought weighing your ingredients was just something they did on the British baking show, it really is helpful when you're making bread. So now I'm like, I'm not making that recipe unless it comes to me in grams. I've become a little bit of a scale snob, but anyway.
Well, I think that's interesting because a lot of times you just try a little bit of this and do a little bit of that, and then that ends up with a recipe that's not repeatable. It's like, well, it turned out really great this time, or I don't know what I did. And it could be a lot of the time it's probably because of that. Because
well, yeah, you and I could weigh 4 cups of flour. Like we could measure 4 cups of flour and they would weigh differently. So that's why if it's asking for 500 grams, you're going to be 500 grams no matter who's doing it. And I think because sourdough can be this process that feels really vague and like scary, like, oh my gosh, weighing your ingredients sets you up for better success. So, even as you're doing your trial and error, you're like, oh, well, at least I don't have to figure out the measurements. Like, was that enough flour? Was that not? Well, it was 500 grams of flour and that's what I needed,
Yeah. And all right, so we've got the kitchen scale, and that's just a gram or an ounce kitchen scale. It's a little small. They're super small.
Yeah.
And they're like $30. 25
man.
bucks. Okay. All right. But obviously some nice to have things, or like,
yeah, it's nice to have a Dutch oven to bake it in. It's nice to have a bench scraper. It's nice to have the bannetons or the proofing baskets. It's nice to have the beautiful little weck jars for your leather.
yes.
But...
well, and then the little slicer thing,
oh, the lame.
Yes, the knife.
The
Fancy knife.
Yeah.
All right, so we got that. So yeah, I mean, you can start minimal, and then you can go now. And again, the first loaves you made
bricks.
Yeah, they were a bit interesting. They smelled good. I mean, cooking them smelled really good.
We were going from like no grains because we were not eating any grains at all. So it was just very exciting to have a grain in the house. My first starter and my first loaves were with einkorn flour because I was trying to go very easy digestion, very low gluten. And what I have learned since then is that that's like one of the hardest places to start. So I didn't really set myself up for success. I could go back there now knowing what I know and probably have a lot more success.
Yeah.
Starting there, I was like, ooh. And it was winter, which I think is a hard time because things happen so much slower with fermentation when it's cold.
Yeah.
So it was not.
Well, I think we have to realize that the yeast that's used in that is kind of like been with humanity for millennia. And so it's going to like develop at the temperatures that we're comfortable at because it was already being kept with the family. And so, you think through time in this, that a little bit of a warmer would have probably, they always would talk about, read the old things, they'd put the sourdough bread in the warmer part of the house. So that's just interesting when you think about like kind of like that some of these, yeast strains have been around for forever.
Well, yeah, I was listening to an audiobook about the history of sourdough, and where, I mean, the Middle East is where it was all coming from, and so that was a very warm climate. This guy reconstructed the ovens of like Giza and was collecting yeast in this arid climate that was thousands of years old. But anyway, yeah, I think that it does like a little bit of a warmer climate, but you can still make it in the wintertime. It just happens differently.
Correct. And we actually would bring it into the office here because we had a warming, well,
Crock pot was warming.
Yes.
The tinctures.
Yes, exactly. So you just put it near that and try to get a little bit warmer. I mean, when it's 85 degrees out, I mean, it can literally explode.
Oh yeah, I mean, my oven popped in 2 hours today because it's the hottest day of the year, and my loaf will be ready for shaping before I go to bed at night, and I just made it at like 4. So
yeah, exactly. So it's super, super fast. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the you use a different starter. You use a stiff starter, which there's not a lot of people out there talking about it, but
there's a few.
Yeah, but you prefer it drastically over everything else. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So whenever I would dabble in, okay, let me back up. The first starter I ever made was with einkorn flour, and I was following the Jovial Einkorn Foods method. Carla, I forget her last name. She's passed away. But that's how she kept her starter, was this stiff starter. And I was like, that's genius. So that's what I started with. But then I had such bad luck with einkorn, I kind of like moved away from it. But when I would look at making like an all-purpose starter, I was so overwhelmed by the idea of just having this giant jar of starter that I kind of had to keep alive. Like I would just have to feed it more flour or more water. And we're busy people. So feeding one more thing, it's hard enough to get you all fed or myself. So I was just like, I'm not doing that. It overwhelmed me. And so I thought, is there a way that I can take this einkorn stiff starter and use it with my all-purpose flour? And so that's what I did. And it's, instead of feeding it every day, I just feed it. I take some out to make a leaven or a pre-ferment, which a lot of really well-known sourdough bakers would tell you to do that, even with your regular wet starter. And then I feed it whenever I need more of it. So I don't have to feed it every day. I don't have to feed it every week. It can sit, I mean, all during strawberry season, it just sat in my fridge for 7 weeks. I didn't bake anything. I just didn't have time.
So, all right. So you can keep it in the fridge, which is nice.
Yeah. And it's a small jar.
Yeah. It's not a big jar.
Because we got all this stuff in our fridge.
And the other thing is you're not doing a lot of discard off of it too. It's not like you have a tremendous amount of.
I don't have a lot of discard. I might have a cup or so. Sometimes I want more discard because I want to make pancakes or something. But or I'll just collect the little bit of discard and just use it when I have it. But yeah, it's been the thing that has been the most, it works for me. I don't feel like I'm its servant or slave. Like it's my servant, because I can go, all right, I'm gonna be home Friday and Saturday. I mean, I'm home a lot, but like I'm home all the time. But I just mean like I'm home with nothing else going on these days. So I can start my leaven the night before. I know that I'll be mixing my dough the next morning, shaping it sometime in the afternoon. And then Saturday morning I can bake my loaves or whatever.
Yeah. So you just mentioned like the process. So explain to us a little bit more of that process.
So when you have a stiff starter, it's literally stiff. So some people will call it a dry starter, but it's
sticky.
It's like a Play-Doh consistency when you make it. And then after it ferments, after it gets active, it is kind of like a sticky, big bubbles. And it's not dry. It is stiff. So it's a lot of times people are doing the mailing dry starters. That's not what it is. Stiff starter. So I'll take that, a little bit of that. It's like 30 grams of it. And then mix it with some flour and water, stir that up, and that's my leaven, or it's levain.
Okay.
If you're French, as you are so cultured. you like to say. Levain. But that is your pre-ferment or your leaven, and that's your active starter. So like that's what you would recognize as a normal wet starter if that's what you are used to seeing. And that's what you bake your bread with.
Okay, so then you make your leaven and then you make your bread. How many
Yes.
hours later?
Well, it depends on the temperature. So a lot of times I'll make my leaven at night, and then it'll definitely be ready by the morning.
Yeah.
In the wintertime, that gives it a nice long, let's say 12 hours before it's ready. In the summertime, it would be ready before that. But a starter is interesting because you want it to be active, but you don't want it to be, you want it to be eating, you want the bacteria in your starter to be eating off the sugars and things in the flour and with the water, but you don't want it to run out of food and fall, and then it's not active, and then your bread's not going to be right.
Yeah.
So that's the trick, and I think that's where people can often not have success because they don't have a starter that is truly active. And that's the other reason I like a stiff starter, is because I'm never working with a hungry, lax lazy starter. Like it is really kicking. So.
Gotcha. All right. So then you make your loaf. How long does the loaf have to rest between making it and baking it?
So once you mix up your flour and water and starter, I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. The very traditional way of making sourdough is you mix your flour and water first, and you let a process called autolyse happen, which is where the flour gets absorbs the water, and then you add your salt, then you add your starter. You might add a little extra water. And I've made bread like that. The whole wheat bread I made the other day was like that, and it was delicious. But for me, I'm just like your average standard home baker. I have not noticed that that's really important. So I mix everything up together. My flour, my water, my starter, my salt, everything. And then I let it do its autolyse. So it's an absorption process. That maybe you do that for half an hour. And then I start a series of stretch and folds, which really helps develop the structure of the bread, the gluten. And it, you can do it 3 times, you can do it 5 times, and then you let it do its bulk ferment.
Okay.
So that again can take longer in the wintertime, less time in the summer.
Okay. And then do you preheat your Dutch oven?
Yeah, you do preheat the Dutch oven. I like to preheat my Dutch oven at 500 degrees, and then I'll kick it down to 425 or 450 to actually bake it. But I like a hot Dutch oven, which is probably why I've burned through a couple of heating elements in our oven. But
yes. Yeah. We definitely have to change those. All right. So then you bake your bread. How long does it bake for typically?
40 minutes, 20 minutes with the lid on, maybe 15 to 20 minutes with the lid off.
All right. And then you have your bread. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you have done like a wide range of things with it too. Like there's all the sourdough things. And I think we're just, there's so many things we could do too. Like we haven't done any nut breads or like cranberry loaves or anything like that.
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't done. Well, that's not true. I did do that Sunday morning loaf that has like chopped apricots, craisins, sunflower seeds. I've done some cinnamon swirl. You don't like raisins, so I don't do a lot of cinnamon raisins.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't done a ton of flavored breads, but I have been doing some whole wheat ones, and I've been grinding my own flour, like the mothers of the 90s. Just really going back.
Well, then you also did some gluten-free stuff too.
I did. Yeah, I successfully have made some decent gluten-free loaves.
Yes.
Although everyone I have given them to haven't been eating gluten for the last 30 years. So they're like, we're not really sure what it's supposed to taste like, but it's delicious. And I'm like, it seems dense. And they're like, it's great.
Yeah.
So it is dense, but it's good.
Well, and I would say that, yes, that they were, because I tasted it, the flavor was great, but they were just a little bit tighter.
But the last loaf that I made, that I gave to my mom, because my mom's like true celiac, cannot have sourdough even, because that is one of the things, if you are gluten intolerant, maybe you can have sourdough, but she was like, no, I can't eat that. But she was like, this one's great, she sliced it and the crumb was a little more open, and it didn't feel like a hockey puck. So
all right, so we got that, but then you've also do a bunch of things with the discard, which is you've done pancakes,
waffles, brownies, banana bread.
Crackers.
Yes, the crackers are really good. Tortillas, those are really
Yeah.
good.
Now, what about the bagels? The bagels are regular sourdough?
Yeah, the bagels use an active sourdough starter. The cinnamon rolls use active sourdough starter. Oh, that Christmas star I made,
Yeah.
that's a discard recipe.
Okay, that's a
Yeah.
discard. That was really good.
Mhm.
Okay, so all the things. There's a lot of things you can do with
You
it.
can, I mean, if you want, you can replace every baked good, but it's one of those things like time. How much time do you have? We eat the crackers so fast.
Yeah.
It's like, good
Yes.
Lord, I would be making crackers every other day if I was really trying to keep us in crackers. So,
Yes, but it's a fun treat.
they're delicious,
yeah.
and you can put fun cheeses with them. And yeah.
Now, of course, we commercialize this.
Well, this is you we're talking about.
And I think it started with a Facebook post, right?
Yeah, you basically stalked me, took pictures of beautiful things I had made, and then you put it on Facebook, and you were like, "Hey, people of the internet."
Yes. Hey, people that follow our farm and love our awesome food, would you like to come learn how to make sourdough because it's delicious?
Yeah, I think there was like 130 comments in
Yes.
an hour or something.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was like one of our top ever performing at organic posts. And
I always told you I'd be your shining star.
so we decided to do some classes, and I don't know how many classes have we done so far?
Oh gosh. I would say a dozen, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, because I've done classes here in the house, and then I've done classes at other people's houses.
Yes. So
So
those are very different types of classes
They
too.
are,
Yeah.
but they're fun. They're just different.
Yeah, because they control the space. So yeah, I mean it's and again it's not a super cheap class to go to, but
But it's also a lot of work on my end.
yes,
So I'm always
yeah.
like, oh
So
my
yeah,
God.
you are like, if you do want to run the classes, there's a specific, like you have basically a schedule that you have to follow the 2 days advance to make sure that you have everything at the right stage, so that when you show up,
Right.
that you show up for the class, that you can bake the loaves and show the loaf coming out of the oven.
Right. Because I want you to see the process, and I want you to see what's happened, like what we're gonna do. I walk you through every single step of the process in 2 hours. And then while you're eating the loaf that I have prepared for you ahead of time, I pull a loaf out of the oven, and I'm like, look, this is what you can make if you follow these steps.
Yes, so you show the proof in the pudding right there.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's important because
Yeah.
it's not like hypothetical. It's like literally this is what we do.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people, because again, it's really interesting to get people's feedback. Well, get interesting to hear people talk about sourdough, because someone says, "Oh, is that like friendship bread?"
The Amish friendship bread.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is a yeast bread, obviously.
Well, it's not exactly. I don't know that actually. I can't remember if there's yeast in it. Maybe there is. I'll have to Google
It's
it
something.
actually.
But it's not a true sourdough.
No, and there's so much sugar in it, and you end up with like 6 starters by the time you're done. And so that's the point. You're supposed to give it away, but
Gotcha.
everybody's had so much Amish friendship bread.
There's only so much.
Nobody wants it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like that, leave a zucchini on your neighbor's porch day. It's
Yes.
Like
Yes.
get rid of
Everyone's
all
got
of
you
your
get a sourdough
Amish-
starter, and
yeah.
you get a sourdough starter.
Amish friendship bread starter.
Yeah. I'm talking to Susan from the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust, and we are talking today about tips for working with the land trust and why you might want to preserve your land. Susan, talk to us about why this is important with farmers.
Well, gosh, we are seeing so much of the available farmland across the country, being used for development purpose. As economies are growing, it's natural for developers to want to tap into that. But we just want to help, farmers in our community and across the United States. There's a lot of resources for farm families to consider what conservation could look like and permanent protection of that farmland. So one of the first things I would suggest is to look, locally. There likely are land trusts in your community that would know about the specific geographies and the conservation values, and just be really great community partners. If there's not an organization locally, then I would turn to the American Farmland Trust, which purposefully is there at a national level to try to help fill the gap where a local land trust may not be able to help a farm family. The other thing I would suggest is it's really never too soon to start planning for conservation or for, the legacy that you're building with a farmland property. So, having those conversations with family or business partners and really developing a succession plan or the retirement plan. Oftentimes, Farm Bureau or your local extension offices will have great content and experts on these types of subjects and can help farmers navigate. The third piece of advice is when you do start to work with that land trust, I would really encourage you to spend time with the conservation easement. They are highly customizable documents, even though they are lengthy, and they are built for you to really think about the attributes of your farm and what you want to preserve and what will remain in commercial production, etc. And just be thinking about down the road, what would it look like if family members may build a home on a portion of it, or perhaps you're leasing some land to another farmer. All of those things are options, and just to go into it open-minded, but give yourself some time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Susan. And if you are interested in finding more about the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust and the affordable, stable leases that they are offering, you can go to www.nwafarmlink.org or contact 479-966-4666. But so we've run the classes, and then we decided, why did we decide to do it in people's house? Did they ask for it, or did we just not want to be in our kitchen as much?
You thought it would be a good idea to offer it as another option for people because it does disrupt our home a bit.
Yeah.
Like I can leave you home with the kids or,
Yes.
whatever.
But you've done some in the evening, so I put the kids to bed.
Yeah.
You run and do your class.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's here, I'm kind of like, not that my mom cares at all. She's great about watching the kids, but it's just kind of like,
Melinda.
and so it's just like, hey, Mom, I need you. And my kitchen's not huge. You know what I mean? So that was another thing. I can fit 10 people in it, but it's crowded. And so.
Yeah, there's definitely space considerations with that. You want to think through.
Yeah.
So we've done the in-person classes and we've done the at people's house, and we charge about the same, although I think for the travel we should probably up the charge because it is, I'd say, a little bit more, I don't know.
It's a different kind of work when I go.
When you walk out, there's no really cleanup at our house to do, but there's a lot more. You have to schlep all that stuff out there.
Well, because I take everything because I want people to see, again, I want people to see all the tools you could get, because I get how some people are like, I need the things to make me feel like I can do the thing. But then there's some people that are like, oh, you mean I could do it with a fork and a bowl? You totally can.
Yes.
So I just like to show it both ways.
Yeah.
Maximalists and, minimalists.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we are now selling sourdough bread in the store too. So that's another sourdough thing. Now you're not making that because you obviously don't have the time. But we could, so we're bringing it in from a local baker, but we do know the margins on it. And the margins are tremendous. And so we said that would be nice if we could bring that back in house once we have the proper way to make it happen.
Yeah.
But
and I think that's possible at some point. It's not
gonna happen anytime soon.
Not right now. Yeah.
What's our sourdough lady's name? Catherine, you're safe for now.
She does a great job.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So delicious.
She does a regular, and she also does a chocolate loaf, chocolate cherry, or just straight chocolate.
It's just, it's got chocolate chips in it.
Oh, okay, yeah, a chocolate cherry would be good. So we've got that, but I just ran the numbers today because the team, we had a little bit of a meeting about some store things, and we did, I think in July, $1,500 in sourdough through the store.
Oh my gosh.
So that's a fair amount of.
She brings 3 dozen a week. She brings a dozen on Thursday, a dozen on Friday, and a dozen on Saturday.
And we sell it for, is it a £1.50 loaf or £1.25?
It's like a 600-gram loaf, so I don't really know.
Okay.
Or maybe it was an 800-gram loaf.
Anyway, they're not big. I mean, maybe they're 7-8 inches across.
Yeah, they're not huge. They're not as big as the loaves that I make. which is fine.
Yes.
They're a perfectly good size,
Yeah.
but they are a little small.
But I have heard that people do finish them in one sitting.
I mean, we have done that.
Yes.
Granted,
So
there are 5 of us each.
yes.
Makes me feel a little better.
Yeah, but yeah, so that has definitely worked out. I think that's a great, it's a great side thing
Yeah.
because, again, with the process, yes, it is a 2-day process, but it's not like it's just a little bit here and a little bit there.
Yeah. And I mean, I've said this in various contexts, but I really think that making sourdough is such an easy way to and it's not that everyone has to be investing in their home in the kitchen, but I think when you have a family or when you're wanting to give something of meaning to someone, making something real with your hands is just, it's such a gift. And it's something that's really been a really fun thing to also give away to people.
Yes, there is, specific people in the community have been recipients of sourdough loaves.
When
Yes.
the crew comes in on a day they're not scheduled because we're in a pickle.
Yeah.
It's really fun to be able to be here's some jam, here's a fresh loaf of sourdough.
Yeah, or it's a tough day out there.
Yeah.
It's cold or it's too hot or something.
Right, and
yeah.
I'll just take some loaves out there with butter, and it just I don't know. Bread is a morale booster.
It totally is. Yes. All right. So let's kind of summarize this. Sourdough's good for you.
I mean, anything that you make in your kitchen is going to be better for you than something you can buy in the store.
Yes.
And that is something that's worth mentioning. There are no real guidelines around sourdough. So if you go to the store and you pick up a loaf of sourdough, I highly encourage you to read the actual ingredients, because unless it says culture or sourdough, something, it most likely has yeast in it, and it's added. Some other things have been added to make it taste sour. It's not actually
correct
sourdough.
Like the sourdough pretzels you told us are not sourdough pretzels.
Right. They were not sourdough pretzels.
Yeah. So make sure you are doing real sourdough. Make sure you're looking at that, because you're right. There's a lot of people that say sourdough and it's not. I mean, I think, it's a great home thing. I think grounding. I think you kind of said it's, in the kitchen, but I think it's grounding.
Yeah, there's so many virtual things. And I think that's another reason the classes have been so popular, that we're tired of getting online and watching everything, so doing something in real life with real people, getting your hands actually dirty, doing something physical and real. That's not just hypothetical and something I watch on the internet. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I like to watch a video of someone else cooking. But I don't know. It's just really empowering.
And we've had all sorts of people come. We've had men, women, kids. You've done it for birthdays, right? That one class you did for a birthday?
Well, yeah, that was really fun. It was a bunch of women who've been friends for 25 years. And they all had summer birthdays. So they all got together and they would do something together every summer. And this year it was a sourdough class with me, and I felt so honored.
Yes, they were super nice.
They were really sweet.
Yeah,
came with me to that one.
But yeah, it's all sorts of people that we've had come through that,
and all different levels of baking experience, which is something I always like to ask. I've had expert bakers who own proofers, and I've had people who literally have no idea. And then that one lady, forget her name. She came to the farm, I don't know, several months after the class she attended, with her starter in her hand. And she goes, "Well, what do I do with it now?" And I was like, "Do you still have the instructions I sent home with you?" "Yes." I'm like, "Well, I would follow those." I'm not going to teach you a second
class right here
now.
while we're standing here in the kitchen.
Busy.
Yes.
It was just so funny.
All right. So I mean, sourdough has been profitable for us. Obviously, we eat a lot of it now. And
too much of
it. And I mean, we're actually now sourcing local wheat. We're working on that. That's actually something we're super excited about.
Very exciting,
that we're actually working on, sourcing local wheat, grinding it ourselves, and then being able to make sourdough with it. So that's super exciting. But it's been a great little journey, I think, for us. And again, as we're trying to figure out how other ways to involve our community and get them to learn about healthy food, it's been a great way to be able to make money with classes, and also be able to help them make their food choices for their families.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you'd like to say before we go?
I don't think so. I think that covers a lot of the highlights.
All right, folks. Well, there you go. That is another kind of episode of the saga of the farm on Central. Next one I don't know. It's not going to be on raising fish. But I was just talking to a friend of mine who's actually doing trout.
Oh.
And an aquaponic system. But
Okay.
That's probably, maybe, but probably
Oh
not.
my goodness. Oh, jeez.
We will be back next week, folks, with probably a more regular episode, but we appreciate you hanging out with us and talking sourdough. And again, as always, if you are interested in more, make sure you are on our email list. That's where all our updates come out. And you can find that by going to www.growingfarmers.com and just input in your email there. And you'll be getting the awesome updates of all the different things that we got going on and new classes, offerings, and things that we think you might be interested as a farmer, homesteader, or educator. All right, folks, that's all for this week. Hey there, interested in learning more about how to make sourdough for yourself and your family? Go ahead to sourdough-startup.com and sign up for our free 3-day workshop. We'll learn all about the history of sourdough, the health benefits, all about how to make a stiff starter and what it takes to keep one going, as well as learn about all the different things you can make with sourdough and what that looks like. So head over to sourdough-startup.com to learn more. So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.